Hi, I'm Siimon Reynolds and welcome to the Fortune Institute. It's a fact, a huge proportion of businesses fail. The question is, why? And how can you avoid being one of them? This is what today's lesson is all about. Now, the first reason that people fail in business is a simple one. They choose the wrong business to go into. So how do you avoid that? What do you look for? Well, I think there are 5 wrong businesses to go into. The first is a business that you have no competitive advantage with. So in other words, you don't offer anything that's any better than the competition. Now, you would imagine that almost no one goes into that type of business, but the total opposite is true. Almost everyone opens up a business that has no competitor advantage, or certainly no meaningful competitor advantage. And of course, they end up not succeeding most of the time. Why? Because of a concept that I call change inertia. What do I mean by that? Well, people will stick with their current supplier unless there's a really good reason to move. Now that's for an expensive product or even a 50-cent product at the supermarket. Most people have change inertia. You've got to give them a terrific reason why they should change. Otherwise, they'll just stay with what they're used to. It's how humans are. I used to see this all the time in the advertising business. Advertising agencies would go to clients and they'd say, we're really creative, but there's lots of creative advertising agencies, so the client wouldn't move. And then they'd go to other clients and they'd say, we're really cost efficient. Well, there's lots of cost efficient ad agencies. And then they'd say, well, we're really good at service, or we're really good at getting results. But they were surrounded by advertising agencies saying exactly the same thing. In the ad industry, it was really difficult to create a meaningful competitive advantage. And that meant that most advertising agencies had great trouble succeeding. Don't make this mistake. Look at your business and say to yourself, honestly, do we really have a reason that someone should go to us? And if you don't, create one. Work on generating 1, 2, or 3 reasons that give people a reason to overcome the change inertia that is such a critical component in the sales process. The next type of business that you should seriously think about avoiding is a slow-growing or declining industry. Now, some of them are really obvious, like DVD stores. Well, clearly, online providers are going to take over that business. So it's really just a matter of time before the DVD store maybe doesn't disappear, but ceases to be a dominant force in film distribution to people in their homes. The PC business has reached a maturity point. It was a fast-growing business 15 years ago, but lately it's been a pretty slow-growing business. But often, those kind of declining businesses or slow-growing businesses are not as easy to see. Be careful not to fall for them. You might be attracted by a business, but force yourself to say, what's it going to be like in 3 years? What's it going to be like in 6 years? And do I really think this is a great place to put my money and invest my time? It is so much easier to enter a moderately fast-growing business. As Warren Buffett used to say, a rising tide lifts all boats. If you're in a fast-growing industry, it's going to lift you up as it lifts your competitors up too. Everybody will find it easier to make money. Ideally, you want to look for that style of business. Now, that's not an absolute imperative. The truth is, there are plenty of companies that are in slow growth industries that are doing really well. And if you have a look at the business expert Jim Collins' books about these companies, you can see that some of them far outperform the companies that are in the fast growing industries. So it's not a fait accompli. It's not a certainty that you won't grow or you can't grow well. And if you own one of those businesses, don't give up. You can make it great and we'll show you how. All I'm saying is, if you're picking a business to go into, best to look for a fast-growing one. Next up, you don't want to go into a business that has too many competitors. Seems obvious, yet hundreds and hundreds of business people do exactly that. They open, for instance, a new clothes line. Now, the truth is, yes, every year there are clothes manufacturers that make a lot of money and create a great business, but it's hard. We don't need any more clothes companies. There's a surplus of them. There are too many competitors. Or what about the fashion for opening apps businesses? Let's say you want to do a series of apps for the iPhone. Well, yes, it's an interesting business. Yes, it's a relatively new business, but there's just too many competitors. It's really, really hard to make a profit in that business. Ask yourself, do I really want to be in a business like this? Or can I find a niche or an industry that doesn't have nearly as many competitors in it? And if you're already in a business that has heaps of competitors, just think, is there an angle, a direction I can take that will separate me from the rest? I think one of the critical types of businesses to stay away from is a business that doesn't fit your style. What do I mean by that? Well, you've got a certain type of personality. Make sure you enter an industry that favors that type of personality, that suits that type of person that you are. For instance, if you are radically creative and wild, you probably shouldn't go into the engineering industry, which is all about being methodical. Or if you're really shy, you probably don't want to go into multi-level marketing in companies like Amway, companies that demand that you get out there and meet a lot of people and take a lot of rejection and uplift people around you in order to sell stuff. The critical point is this: don't just go into a business because you think that you're going to make money from it. Also say to yourself, does this suit me, the type of person I am? And am I going to enjoy being in this business? Because ideally, you're going to be in this business for 10, 15 years. You've got to make sure that you enjoy it. You've got to make sure it really fits the type of person that you are. If you do this, you won't just make a lot more money than going for a business that supposedly makes money, but you're going to enjoy life a lot more as well. And finally, avoid businesses that demand big equipment purchases regularly. I was looking at buying a TV post-production place, and I saw that every 6 or 7 years, they had to spend $4 million on new equipment. They had to constantly update their equipment, otherwise clients wouldn't go to them. You want to be careful about a business like that. On a smaller scale, I noticed that printing companies often have to update their machinery because the competitors come up with cheaper presses that can do faster jobs for less money, and so the clients go to them. That's just another example of an industry that you want to stay away from. If you have to regularly spend large amounts of money on equipment, think twice about entering such a business. So, how else do people end up failing in business? Well, one way is they enter a new style of business or industry. Now, I applaud people who create a totally new industry. The truth is, the advancement of society depends in part on these type of pioneers. And it's got to be said that there's potentially absolutely astronomical wealth if you can pioneer a totally new industry. When Ingvar Kamprad started IKEA, no one was selling furniture that you had to take home and build yourself, and he made a fortune. When Bic pens first introduced the disposable pen, it became a worldwide phenomenon. And of course, when Henry Ford introduced the first Ford, there were almost no paved roads in the world. He was certainly a pioneer, and he certainly ended up making an absolute fortune. But here's the problem. You're vastly more likely to fail as well if you start in a new industry or business. The failure rate is absolutely through the roof. By far, the safest choice to make is to enter a proven industry where there's a history of people paying money for products like yours or services like yours, and then make a change to it. So take an existing industry and think of an angle, a positioning, a way of looking at it that other people haven't. Then you're sure of getting the new customers, but you won't have the danger of being in an industry that actually doesn't end up being an industry at all. Here's another way that people fail in business: not having enough data. The truth is, and most of us don't like to do it because it's not how we are as entrepreneurs, you have to measure everything you do in business. Now, I know that you're talented. I know that you're intuitively strong, but the reality is you can be all that, but if you don't add measurement to it, you're not a complete business person. And you look at the world's best business people, and they're always measurement oriented. Ever heard of a guy called David Sokol? Not many people have, but he's Warren Buffett's fix-it man. Whenever Warren Buffett has a company in his portfolio that isn't going well, he sends Sokol in to fix it. Now, how does this guy do that? He does it by being an expert at measuring. He looks at every element of the business, he looks at the stats, and then he tries to improve each element just a little bit. And if you do the same, you're going to find that every month your business gets just that little bit better and you get just that little bit richer. So, what kind of stuff should you be measuring in your business? Well, here's a few things. What about the time spent selling? How much time a week do you spend selling to customers? Maybe it's 12 hours. Well, what would happen if you could just measure that and then lift it up so that the average was 15 hours? You'd probably sell a whole lot more stuff. What about measuring what your sales success rate is? Do 1 out of 8 people who visit your website buy, or do 1 out of 3 people who you visit for a meeting buy? You've got to work out what that success rate is. And once you've measured it, then you can improve it. What about measuring which ads work? Most people just keep running the same ads again and again, and they're not even sure that they're working. Measure it and improve it. What about measuring where your customers come from? Do you actually know where you get your customers? You've got to do that work, and when you do it, you're going to find you make more money. Another thing worth measuring is your average purchase per customer. How much does the average customer spend with you? Let's say it's $6. Well, once you know that, try and get it up to $8. And you can see that bit by bit, when you do this type of thinking and this type of measuring, your business really will improve. What about net margin? Are you sure of that? Do you need to measure that so that you can increase it? What about who your most valuable customers are? Are you sure? Do you know that? You've got to measure it to find out. Also, what are your competitors are doing? So many people don't even look at that on regular occasions. The truth is, there is so much stuff that you can measure. Now, I don't want you to spend all day just measuring and go broke because you spent your time measuring instead of going out and selling stuff. But what I do advocate is that you do spend a few hours a week, every week, looking at your measurements, your figures, and seeing how you can improve them and comparing them to previous weeks and months. You should aim to do a 1-page monthly summary sheet so that you can look back over the last 6 months and see how your business is performing in the key performance areas. One of the biggest ways that people end up failing in business is they spend all their time doing low-value activities. You see, people are always complaining about the hours that they work. But when you really analyze what they do, so many of them are just wasting 3/4 of the day. What are the 3 biggest wasters? Well, it won't be a surprise to you. The first one is useless administration or trivial administration. The second one, we know all too well. It's long meetings. Sometimes they take up half the day. And the third, of course, is the endless emails that keep coming across our computer that we feel sometimes that we have to answer. Now, here's the reality. You should rush those tasks. You should put them last in your day, because in the vast majority of cases, they're not the things that you should be doing to maximize your income. Now, sometimes they are. Sometimes there's a very important email. Sometimes, of course, there's a very important meeting. All I'm saying is you've just got to be really careful of those 3 things, because they can end up not just wasting your day, but wasting your year. One of the best high-performance experts I've ever worked with is Dr. Fred Gross, and he has this concept called dollar productive activities. He has a simple question. I'd like to ask you this very same question. How many hours do you spend each week on dollar productive activities? Activities that actually increase your income. His research shows that most people, when they're really honest with themselves, come up with about 6 hours a week on dollar productive activities. Now think about that. They're literally only spending about 6 hours a week increasing their income. The rest of it is spent handling the business that they've got. Now, once you know that concept, you'll be able to radically transform how you use time so you're doing vastly more dollar productive activities. What's the solution? How do you do this? Well, number one, being conscious of the concept of dollar productivity is absolutely crucial. And then you want to get clear on what your dollar productive activities are. If I was to say to you, what are the 3 things that you can do to increase your income? Can you tell me immediately? Well, you've got to be able to do that. When you're absolutely crystal clear about what your dollar productive activities are, then you can schedule them and get more of them done each day. Another great way to get more dollar productive activities happening is to get an assistant or outsource most of your tasks that aren't important, that aren't dollar productive, to other people. Now, a lot of people say, I can't possibly afford an assistant. But the truth is, when you get really conscious of how many hours a week you're spending doing low value activities, activities that actually don't make you money, then you'll see in most cases it's highly cost efficient to get an assistant. Because if you can move from 6 hours doing dollar productive activities a week to 12 hours, well, you should double your income. But you're only going to be able to do that if you've got someone handling all those trivial tasks. Now, I mentioned before David Sokol. Do you know that David Sokol has 2 full-time assistants and 1 part-time assistant? Now, you might say, well, of course, he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and he is. But the reality is, he knows that he can get so much more money producing activities done when he's got these assistants. Now, you may not have 3, you may not be able to afford 2, but you can probably afford 1 at least part-time. Now, that alone has the potential to transform your business as long as you use the extra time that you save on creating income opportunities. Now, a really good way to make sure that you're doing dollar productive stuff most of the day is to design an ideal day. Literally write down what would be the perfect business day and then stick to it. So if that has 2 hours in the morning of dollar productive, then 3 hours in the afternoon of dollar productive, schedule that in your diary. Once you've got an ideal day and start sticking to it, you're going to find that your sales and your income go through the roof. And of course, you must do your dollar productive activities first. If you do your emails first, or your meetings first, or your admin first, and there's a little bit of space at the end of the day for your dollar productive activities, well, you know you're not going to make much money. You've got to put them first in the day, regardless of how many so-called urgent things that you have to do that really don't increase your income. The next reason that so many people fail in business is poor staff choice. Look, here's the truth. It can't just be up to you. I know you're good at what you do, but that can be a trap in itself because you want to do everything yourself, or you want to be in charge of everybody so that they really must all answer to you every second of the day. Well, look, there's no growth potential in that. You have to start trusting staff. And in order to do that, you've got to make sure that you choose staff really well. The key to your growth is to bring in staff that are excellent, that really exponentially increase the value that you can create out in the marketplace. So what do you look for in potential staff? Well, I look for 2 main things. The first is positivity. So much research shows that positive thinking people perform so much better than negative or neutral thinking people. There's countless studies done in countries all over the world that support this. Positive people have less stress as well. Now, obviously, as your company grows, you don't want people in there that are highly stressed. It lets everybody down. It makes everybody feel bad. And of course, it's not good for the people themselves. If you employ positive thinking people, you're going to find there's a lot less stress in your business. Positive people are resilient, and resilience is one of the critical factors in business performance. You got to get back up when you get knocked down. You know that's the truth. So you want to make sure that you employ people who have that same resilience. And positive people increase morale. They uplift people around them. And if you're in a startup or you're in a business that's struggling to get ahead, having that high morale is an absolutely critical component of medium and long-term success. The other thing I look for in staff is commitment and ambition. That can pretty much beat any obstacle. If you've got someone who may not be as intelligent as the others, but is super committed and is super ambitious, well, they're going to do a great job. Quite often they'll outperform the so-called smart person, the so-called experienced person. Enthusiasm is incredibly persuasive, and when someone's ambitious, they're full of enthusiasm. And clients love it. Customers love people who are enthusiastic. When you've got someone who's got commitment and ambition, they've got enthusiasm as well. And naturally, someone who's ambitious and committed is going to work hard, and that can make all the difference as well. People who are really committed to their careers with you see themselves as self-employed. Yes, they work for you, but in their own heads, they work for themselves. And they're dedicated to making sure that their company performs well, even if it's only got one person in it, and even if they're working under the roof of another company. That attitude of independence, of being self-employed, is really, really powerful, and ambitious, committed people always have it. Next up, poor staff training. Another reason that so many businesses end up failing. And it's so easily fixed. If you want staff who are trained well, you need only do two things. The first is you've got to be totally clear with them what you want and what you value. So many bosses aren't. So these staff are well-meaning and they're trying to do their best, but they're not exactly sure what you really value, what you really want them to do each day. Unless you're really crystal clear about that, then maybe half the day they end up doing what you want and half the day they don't. You've got to be clear in your own head, and you've got to tell them constantly the kind of stuff that you really want them to do. Now that seems like a really simple thing, but time and time again, I've seen employees in companies not exactly sure about what their boss really values in their day-to-day activities. And the second thing you need to do is teach them productivity. Now, almost no one does, but if you can teach them the keys to being productive every day, and you teach one person that, then 10 people that, then 30 people that, the difference that it can make in the overall productivity of your business is absolutely colossal. But when have you ever seen an entrepreneur teach staff productivity? No one ever does it, but I urge you to make it a focus of your training. So if you do those two things, you're clear about what you value and make sure they're doing it, and you teach them productivity, your business sales are going to skyrocket. What about capital? A lot of people have heard that not having enough capital when you start a business is one of the primary reasons for failure. And you know what? All the research says it's true. But I think about that, and then I think about another piece of information that I know, that some of the fastest growing businesses and some of the most successful startups were actually started with very little money. So how can both be true? Well, I just think it's horses for courses. You do need to have extra money when you start up a company. But the truth is that you may not actually ever use it, but you must have it there. When you create your projections, then double what you estimate it will cost, and double the amount of time you estimate it will take, and then halve what you estimate the results to be. And if you do that and make sure you've got enough capital to survive those figures, then you're probably going to have enough capital to build your business. It's far better to have the money in store and not use it than obviously not have it at all and need it. A good rule of thumb is when you start your business or when you're building your business to have enough capital so that you can survive for about 6 months. And if you do that, it's going to make you feel psychologically very confident and dynamic. Now, here's a common reason that businesses fail: having the wrong partner. Now, I believe there are 4 rules of choosing a partner for your business. The first is you should know them. Now, I've got to tell you, I have made that mistake. I've gotten in business partners that I didn't know that well who had good reputations, and I've almost always regretted it. Because what I found was 3 months down the track, 6 months down the track, they weren't necessarily the type of person I thought they were, but I hadn't done my homework. You also need to like them. Now, this is really important. Just because they've got the right curriculum vitae, just because they seem to have the goods, doesn't mean that you should be in partnership with them. You're going to be working together for thousands of hours. It's really important that you actually like hanging out with them. You should make sure that your partner complements your skills. I remember once I was in a business, and I'm generally more of a big picture thinker. And I employed this partner to do a lot of the admin and a lot of the more intricate work of business. And then I found out a few months in that he also was a big picture thinker. Now, we got on fine, so it worked okay, but maybe it would have been better for me to get someone who'd handle the areas that I wasn't really good at. You've got to be clear about what you're good at and what you're not good at, what you like doing and what you don't like doing, and find a partner that's prepared to do the stuff that you're not good at and don't like. And of course, it's crucial that your partner has the same vision for the company as well. I've seen this so often. People in a hurry get into partnerships and they assume that their partner's thinking about the company in the same way that they are. And then 4 or 5 months down the track, they get into an argument because they've got different visions and they didn't discuss them beforehand. You need to clarify it beforehand and even write it down so you've both got a copy of what your vision is. And then when it comes to an argument, you can return to that vision and say, hey, listen, we went into business to do this, and what you're doing doesn't follow that. Having that clarity is absolutely vital to creating a strong long-term business relationship. Okay, one of the biggest reasons that businesses fail is simply bad management. Now, who's the manager? You are. You've got to make sure that you're managing powerfully and effectively. A leader has several primary roles, in my opinion. The first is to set goals and priorities. Most business owners are unclear about what their goals are. Most business owners aren't exactly sure, if they have those goals, which are most important, what their true priorities are. Are you? Are you clear about your business's goals for the next 90 days? What about the next 6 months? What about the next year? What about the next 5 years? Now, that clarity often doesn't take a lot of time to get, but you do have to sit down by yourself and get clear on it. Now, when you do, all of a sudden you'll feel this incredible burst of motivation and energy because you can see the vision. And you take that energy and you take that vision and you take those goals and priorities to your staff, and then make sure that those goals and priorities are entrenched in their mind every single working day. Leaders must also inspire and motivate. Hey, it's not just about doing the work. A lot of entrepreneurs are efficient, they get a lot of stuff done, but they forget to look after the human side. They forget to take the time and effort to inspire and motivate their staff. You should be trying to replicate yourself. You should be trying to create more people like you. And in order to do that, you have to inspire them with the type of company that you want to be. And you've got to also inspire them that they have the ability to get to where they want to be in life if they stay with your company. That takes motivation, that takes inspiration, and you've got to do it. I believe that work actually mimics the family environment, and people subconsciously are looking for a father figure or a mother figure in the business owner. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to hug them all the time or take them and feed them, but the reality is that kind of dynamic is happening in the work environment. So accept that and lead. If you're going to be a leader, lead. Be their commercial father, be their corporate mother, and look after them. It may seem like a strange concept, but if you try it, I think you'll find it works. And of course, great managers are excellent role models. The reality is, you can talk your head off about all this stuff that you want them to be, but you will be far more effective in initiating change and improvement in the company if you live what you're talking about. Being a role model is really important. In my last business, I used to get into work at about 7:30 a.m. And once I got into the habit of doing that, I found that half the staff would come in earlier. Maybe not 7:30 a.m., but half of them would be in about 8 or 8:15 a.m. So did I actually say come in early? Absolutely not. They were welcome to get in at 9 a.m. But because I led by example, they felt they should come in as well. Leading by example is incredibly effective, but most people are quite happy to tell their staff what to do, but not so happy to do it themselves. When I talk of being a role model, I talk of living the kind of character-led life that really people admire in a human, not just in a business leader. For instance, it's really important that you be honest. I think it's really important that you be warm. Cold-hearted bosses are almost always universally disliked. Of course, it's really important that you be efficient and that you be consistent. So if you have taken one point of view in the business, then you should consistently live that point of view. Finally, I think it's really important that you be humble. A lot of the work that Jim Collins has done in recent years has shown that the very best business leaders aren't the outrageous personalities you so often see in business magazines. They're often, paradoxically, quite quiet and humble leaders. Medium term and long term, it's those type of people that are often getting the best results. Now, of course, if you're a loud or out there type of personality, you don't want to pretend to be overly humble or overly quiet. You want to be yourself. But just keep in mind that humility is a highly respected character trait in humans, and certainly a respected character trait in managers. The next reason businesses fail: primitive systems. Now, I believe there are two types of business. The first is the talent-based business. Now, a classic example of that is the movie studio. It gets really talented writers in, really talented directors in, and sales go up. Then those talented people end up leaving, and the movie studio's sales and profits end up going down. It's a talent-based business. Now, there are plenty of talent-based businesses doing okay. In fact, some of them do really well. But I don't think they're as good long-term as business number two, a systems-based business. Now, a classic example of that is McDonald's. You don't have to be incredibly talented to work there, as you probably noticed, but the business itself is astronomically huge. Why? Because it's got outstanding systems. In fact, I heard that around 30% of McDonald's staff leave every year. But does it affect the business? No, because the systems are so good. They're so organized in there, it almost doesn't matter who works in their restaurants. The company is going to perform well. Systems-based businesses are better because, number one, they're more cost efficient. You don't have to pay so many high salaries for the super talented people. Number two, they're more scalable because you're not limited by a handful of really talented people. then it's easier for you to expand the business beyond 2 or 3 people. If you've got the right systems in place, you can grow really big. I also believe that systems-based businesses are less stressful. You let the system do the work. If you've got really good, organized, effective systems, it really takes the pressure off the individuals. But the reality is, most entrepreneurs have almost no systems in their business. And that's why so many of them remain small. What kind of systems do you need? Well, a whole stack of them. I think you need performance evaluation systems. So if you've got 6 staff or 10 staff, how do you evaluate their performance? You should be systematic and rigorous in how you do it. You should be doing it either weekly or quarterly or annually, but you should have a system for making sure that their performance is properly evaluated. I believe that you should have information systems. What kind of money is coming in? What type of clients are coming in? You've got to be clear about this. You've got to have that type of information absolutely clear in your mind and in your senior reports' minds. Otherwise, you really can't make educated decisions. You should have planning systems. Once a month or once every 6 months or several times a year, you should get together with your key senior staff and sit down and plan ahead about what kind of business you should create. Now, if you don't have a system for doing this, what you're going to find is, what I have found is, suddenly it's 2.5 years and you haven't had a planning day. You haven't had a planning process go on that can build your company. As a result, your company just kind of ticks on, but without the same power and focus that it should have. Here's an interesting one. Morale systems. How do you keep your people happy? Well, it shouldn't just happen by accident. You should make sure that, say, every week there's an activity that lifts morale, or that you have a competition that lifts morale, or that you have events or pay reviews at certain times that lift morale. You shouldn't leave morale to chance. It should be part of your system. Naturally, you should have marketing systems. How do you get customers? What are you testing? This area should be absolutely systematized. In fact, if you just get this one area right, your whole business will explode with greater profits. But once again, most people usually don't have marketing systems. And here's a great idea: have client happiness systems. If you've got a business where the happiness of your clients is imperative, and let's face it, what business isn't like that, then design a system to make sure that they're happy, that you've got a system of contact or a system of surveys or a system of client satisfaction, so you know exactly how many of your clients are really delighted with your service and which aren't. That system alone could play a huge part in the growth of your business. And of course, you need financial systems. A lot of people know that, but a lot of people don't have them. But to know the health of your company is only possible when you have strong financial systems and reporting structures, so you know where the dollars are going. If you can just switch from being purely a talent-based business to also being a systems-based business, you're going to find that your medium-term profits are going to grow in a way that is quite untypical for businesses in your industry. The next reason that I think a lot of businesses fail is a bit of a strange one. I believe that a lot of businesses fail because of the low confidence level of the entrepreneur who starts them. Dan Sullivan, the great Canadian entrepreneurs coach, believes that confidence is the most important skill of all for entrepreneurs to learn. Why does he think that? Well, his theory is as follows. He says, look, everything is changing so fast. Whatever you learn, whatever your education is going to be outdated in a very short amount of time. But if you can just grow inner confidence, then it doesn't matter the pace of change. You've got this one thing, this tool that can be used in an ever increasingly changeable and complex marketplace. If you're confident, you'll adapt to the changes. If you're confident, if the changes knock you down, you'll overcome them and thrive. That kind of personal confidence is your greatest weapon in the ever-changing world of business. And the more you think about it, I think the more it makes sense. But how many of us are working on our confidence? No, we get in there and we work on our sales, but what about our confidence? Very few people work on that. So I want to show you a few ways to do that. Number one is preparation. The more preparation you do, the more detail-oriented you are, the more effort that you make in your business, in the area of preparation, the more confident you will be, because you know you've got it right. You know you've thought it through, and your potential clients and customers really sense that confidence that comes from preparation. The second way to get confidence is expert knowledge. Look, it doesn't matter who you are. You can't be super confident if you don't have absolutely expert knowledge on your particular industry. Take the great real estate expert John McGrath. Whenever you sit down with him, you're just hit by the sheer amount of stats he knows about the real estate industry, the knowledge that he has about the particular suburbs that he sells in, the knowledge that he has about housing in general. That kind of expert knowledge takes time to develop, but it gives you a massive confidence. John Siimon, the great home loan king, was invited recently by the Reserve Bank to address them on the economy and how it affected housing. Now, why would they do that? Why would they take this outsider in? Because he's got expert knowledge that they respect. Now, do you think that gives him confidence? Absolutely. He's got unshakable confidence because he's got expert knowledge. One of the richest young Australians in the world is a financial trader by the name of Greg Coffey. You want confidence? This guy was so confident, he left a firm that was going to give him and his team around $250 million in bonuses because he wanted to start at another firm. Now that is confidence. How did he get that confidence? Expert knowledge. He knew exactly what to do in his industry. So he had the confidence to move to another business. Confidence increaser number 3. Work on your self-identity. How you perform, and plenty of research studies have shown this, is very closely aligned to what your self-identity is, how you see yourself. You can do all the preparation in the world, but if you don't really see yourself as a success in that field, as an expert in that field, then people will detect it and you won't be nearly as persuasive. You've got to work on that self-identity by imagining yourself being a certain way, acting as if you're a certain way, performing as if you're a certain way, and then you're going to start being that certain way. When you lift up your self-identity, your performance soon follows. But you have to work on it every day to make sure that that self-identity is strong. And don't forget, number 4, you need to work on your mini identities. The reality is we have a variety of self-identities. You have a certain self-identity when it comes to your social life. You might see yourself as shy. You might see yourself as gregarious. You have a certain mini identity when it comes to handling the figures in your business. You might see yourself as bad or you might see yourself as good. All throughout your life, you have a series of mini identities. So you need to take the time, just 20 minutes, and sit down and say, what are my identities, my mini identities? How do I see myself in these different areas of my life? And when you find a weakness, you start focusing on it and lift it up. So you're as confident about that mini identity as the rest of your identity. Now, the last reason we'll talk about today about why businesses fail is an elementary one, but so many people fall for it. That is giving up too soon. There's this wonderful book called 3 Feet from Gold, and it's about this story about a miner who spent months and months digging for gold until finally he gave up. He was certain there was no gold in this area. Dejected, he sold the lease for the land for a pittance to someone else who in their first week dug just 3 more feet and of course struck gold. Now I think that is happening all the time in the arena of business. People create a startup, it doesn't go as well as they think, and they start looking for the exit door. And they may be in business for another year or 2, but they're not in business fully. They've already got half a leg out the door and are looking for another business or for a job that they can retreat into. Now, I'm not saying that you should flog a dead horse and keep going with the business for 5 years and 10 years if it isn't working well. But I am saying this, that persistence is one of the most crucial components of entrepreneurial success. So make sure that you're not giving up too early. So many companies that ended up great started out growing slowly. Hewlett-Packard, or as it's now called these days, HP, it literally started as just a 2-man business with virtually no money in a little garage. Now it's one of the biggest technology companies in the world, but you can still go and visit the little garage Hewlett and Packard started in. It's got a place in Silicon Valley history. Sony just started out with a handful of friends who didn't even have a product, but they had a dedication that they were going to commit the next few decades to creating a great electronics company. Amongst smaller companies, look at Morgan's Hotel Group, one of the world's premier boutique hotel groups. You want to know the start of that company? One guy used to own a disco. The other guy, his partner, actually came out of jail. And they didn't have much money. They got it together and they opened a small hotel called Morgan's on Madison Avenue in New York City. Now Morgan's Hotel Group is one of the biggest boutique hotel groups on the planet. Look at Chanel, a massive multi-billion-dollar fashion empire. Started off with just one person stitching dresses. If you keep going, you will eventually reach what Malcolm Gladwell called the tipping point, a point where all of a sudden your efforts over the last few months and years suddenly come to fruition. And there's this burst of growth, this burst of profit, and you may never be in trouble in business again. You reach the tipping point where you move into profit and you move into fast growth. It happens to many, many businesses and it can happen to yours, but you have to persist to make that eventuate. The great business guru and high potential expert Brian Tracy has a great analogy for it. He says that business is like a plane taking off. 1, you have to choose your destination. It'd be ridiculous if a pilot got into the plane and just started flying. They're very clear about what their destination is. 2, you have to write your flight plan. What is your flight plan for your business? So many people do not have it written down, are not clear about it. 3, you have to take off at full throttle. That's the only way a plane can get up into the air, isn't it? Now later on it can go on cruise control and pull back the engines and relax a little, but when it's taking off, it's gotta be full throttle. That's the same with your business. Your business has to be full throttle, going full on, and you have to be going full throttle. Otherwise, your plane, your business isn't going to get off the ground. The next part of your flight plan is you have to plan for turbulence. So many entrepreneurs start a business and they're stunned when things don't go well. Let me tell you, that's the norm. That's the way business is. You go from obstacle to hardship, from hardship to problem, from problem back to obstacle. But it doesn't mean you're not succeeding. It doesn't mean you're not creating a great business. You've got to plan for that turbulence. You've got to say to yourself, I am unstoppable, no matter what may happen in advance. Next, you have to make continual course corrections. You will be off course a lot of the time. When you fly on a 747, you are frequently off course, and the plane's computers adjust and bring you back on course every time. You've got to expect to make continual course corrections every week of your business life. And finally, you've got to persist until you succeed. And if you do that, you will land in the right place. You will reach your destination. The truth is, folks, business is not an accident. Sure, there might be some luck short term, but medium and long term, the people who get really good at business skills, the type of skills we're teaching you at the Fortune Institute, the type of people who get really good at these skills are the ones that make it in business. It may take them a year, it may take them 5 years, but they will make it if they stick to our system and you stick to a business flight plan. So let's summarize all the different potential ways there are to fail in business. First of all, a simple one, picking the wrong business. That's enough to make sure you don't succeed in business. Be careful with the business that you pick. Make sure that it's got growth built into it. Make sure that it fits the style of person that you are. Next up, we talked about the dangers of entering a totally new industry or totally new style of business. Now, there are great rewards, let me be clear about that. And I don't want to scare you away from doing it if you've got a terrific idea. But just know that the way most people become wealthy in business is they take a traditional business, one that's already existing, and they change it. They make it new or different in some way. Not enough data is something we discussed, a crucial reason that a lot of businesses go under. They just don't know what's happening in their business, and so they can't actually correct it. We talked about doing low-value activities. This is the disease of today's entrepreneur. Busy, but busy doing what? Busy doing stuff that doesn't really increase their income. Another path to business failure is poor staff choice. We looked at 2 things that you should look for in staff before you employ them. As an extension of that, poor staff training is another path to failure. Once you've got your staff in the door, you've got to dedicate yourself to training them so they're getting better and better. The future of your company is, in fact, with your staff. We looked at the problem of not enough capital, a fundamental reason that businesses fail these days. The irony is, a lot of the most successful businesses didn't start with much capital. But don't take the risk. Make sure you've got enough money to survive 6 months in business. One of the biggest causes of failure is, of course, having the wrong partner. And we talked about several ways to make sure that doesn't happen. We looked at bad management. Now, we know that a bad manager is unlikely to create a successful company. And we talked about some of the ways that you can be an excellent manager in today's business world. We looked at the danger of primitive systems. If you don't have sophisticated, organized systems throughout your business, then you're really just reliant on the talent of the individuals and the hard work of the individuals to make the business grow. Now, that's very challenging and it's going to end up exhausting. You're much better off having a systems-based business. We looked at the importance of low confidence, how that can really just bring down your chances of success in business. And we talked about different ways for you to boost your confidence immediately. And finally, we talked about giving up too soon. So many businesses that have such great promises fail as a result of purely stopping too early. Don't make these mistakes. Right, let's now get into your weekly work. Very simple homework this week. Number 1, I want you to identify which area we've talked about that you're weakest in. Okay, so just sit down for 5 minutes, be honest with yourself, maybe ask a few people around you and decide, yes, this is the area I'm weakest in. And then number 2, think of 3 ways to fix it. You're going to find These ways won't be hard. You're going to come up with them straight away. It's really, really easy to do this. But unless you actually take the time to think of it, they won't occur to you normally. You'll just go on with your business as it is. Take the time to think of these 3 ways of fixing it and then institute them into your next business week. And it will make all the difference to your success and certainly the avoidance of failure in business. Well, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed today's lesson on why businesses fail and how you can avoid doing the same. Next week, we're going to talk about a really powerful area of marketing, direct mail. It's been around for centuries, but it can transform your business. Until then, work hard, think big, and I'll see you next week at the Fortune Institute.